You know, every once in a while you have to, or you want to, do a bang-up fancy dinner and have a wonderful main course. Well, here it is. It's a whole tenderloin of beef surrounded with mushrooms and Madeira and baked in a beautiful pastry crust. This is a filet of beef Wellington, and we're doing it next time on The French Chef. This is a great big tenderloin of beef, and it's going to cook in this little tiny pastry shell, and it's going to come out looking like a ship of state, the SS Beef Wellington. We're doing it today on The French Chef.
The French Chef is made possible by a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated and a grant from the Polaroid Corporation.
Welcome to The French Chef. I'm Julia Child. I've got some great big tenderloins of beef here. And this is one of the most expensive cut of beef. And in case you've forgotten where it comes from, we'll point it out on our familiar, beautiful porterhouse steak. As you'd remember, the porterhouse comes from the loin, and you have this big, large piece of meat, and then you have the round piece of meat here, and you have your T-bone shape here, and this is your tenderloin or filet of beef. And the loin, if you remember, comes from here. It comes from the end of the rib to your hip. It's the small of your back. And the tenderloin starts up at the rib, and it's very small when it starts. You see that little small end, and then it gets larger and larger and comes down to a big end down at this side at your hip. But there's still more to it than this piece. You also have the tenderloin butt, which continues it on down into the hip or the sirloin. And this piece is less tender than the rest of it because it has some gristle, as you can see here, and a big piece of fat. So that this piece is usually not included in the tenderloin or filet, but it's called, if it's boned out, it's called the New York butt or the New York sirloin. Sometimes you never know what they're going to call it. But tenderloins in butcher talk are called tenders, and sometimes we'll hear, at least my butcher will say, well, I got to go and pull out my tenders. And that just means he's pulling the tenderloins out of the loins. And you have, in the tenderloin, you have, either you can have it as a whole piece if you order it that way, or you can have it as steaks. And this first thick third is called the Chateaubriand. This is the sort of the big heart of the tenderloin. And then the second third here are where the tournedos come from, or filet steaks. And then the small end here is the filet mignon, or tenderloin tips. So you never know what they're going to call it. And you can buy the meat either way. This one is all trimmed, as you see. And this one still has its big fat on the suet, and it also has a bit of filament here that has to be peeled off, and you can have that done for you, or you can do it yourself. And if you do it yourself, be sure to cut. There's all kinds of fat up at this end. Be sure to cut them all off and peel this off, and cut off any extra fat. This is the part where it hit the backbone. You can cut off extra little bits of fat there. But be sure that if you buy a trimmed tenderloin like this one, be sure that you also buy the suet, or ask your butcher to give you a piece of suet or some pork fat, because you're going to need it later. And now the tenderloin, although it's the most expensive beef cut, has really the least flavor of any parts of the beef. And if you're going to cook it for this recipe, Beef Wellington, I suggest that you marinate it in a wine marinade, and look up in any good cookbook about wine marinades, and then let it marinate in the wine for about 24 hours. It'll give it a lot more taste. And then either before or after marinating it, you want to tie it up, because you see there's a big strip there, and you want to keep it in place. And you want to make it even. So take the tail, leaving the fat part below, and fold it up over so that you have a piece of beef that's even all around. And then just take some butcher's twine. And if you have a nice butcher, he'll give you some corned beef twine, which is nice, soft, white string, and it's very easy to tie things up with. And then just wrap the string around. And then be sure that you catch this tail here, and then come up the other way. And the reason that you want to wrap it up, because we're going to cook this in a crust, and you want it to be sure to keep its shape. And it's also going to get a preliminary cooking, a preliminary baking, which will stiffen it up and have it so it will keep its shape when it goes into the crust. Now this piece now is about 12 inches long, and it will serve 8 people. You might try serving more, but I've usually found with this recipe that 8 people's enough. And then it's going to have its preliminary roasting, and if it's been marinated, or in any case you want to dry it off thoroughly, and then take some good cooking oil or light olive oil or melted butter and rub it all over with the oil. And then take your piece of suet here and cut off a piece of that, and that's for the underneath the beef. This is to protect the beef when it gets roasted. And then put the other piece of suet on top. And this is all to protect it, because it's going to be baked in a hot oven. And then bake it in a 425-degree oven in the middle level for 25 minutes, turning it once and putting the suet back on top of it. And then let it cool off to room temperature. This 25 minutes doesn't really cook it, it just stiffens it. Then let it cool off to room temperature and untie it. And you see now this has just been roasted and it's still rare, but it has stiffened a little bit. And that's just what you want. And this, you can roast the meat ahead of time and refrigerate it, and then before you're going to use it, bring it up to room temperature. So in this recipe, which is a rather complicated one, you'll find that with a great deal of it you can do things ahead of time, so that by the time you assemble it you'll think, my, what a very simple recipe this is. And now the next thing that we have is the mushroom flavoring, because the filet of beef Wellington is a tenderloin of beef which is surrounded with a mushroom and foie gras and wine coating. And this is the mushroom flavors. We've done this many times before. And what it is very finely diced mushrooms which are sautéed in butter and shallots. And for this, I've used about 2 pounds or 6 cups of finely diced mushrooms, and 2 tablespoons of butter for the sauté, and 2 tablespoons of minced shallots or scallions. And then you have to cook them for, if you squeeze them out first so they're dry, you only need to cook them about 8 or 10 minutes. And if you haven't squeezed them, you probably have to cook them for 15 minutes. But you want to be sure that they separate from itself, because this has got to be a very dry stuffing. And then, after it's dry, you would put in half a cup of Madeira. I'm just putting in a sample there, because I already have some in. And be sure when you use the Madeira that you use Sercial, or dry Madeira. And then boil this Madeira down until, again, the mushroom pieces separate from each other. And then it's going to be mixed with foie gras. And be sure also that you have carefully seasoned it. And here is your foie gras, or you can use liver paste. I use some of the French liver paste, which came in one of these little cans, which is very good. And then put your mushrooms in with your foie gras. If you use black foie gras, it's very expensive. I used about, say, half a cup or 4 ounces of liver paste. Actually, with this Duxelles, this is called a Duxelles, this mushroom mixture. Actually, with it, the proportions don't make too terribly much difference as long as you have, about 3 cups when you're through. And now you are ready to do the pastry crust. And this is to be should be a homemade pie dough. We've made so many of these. I'm going to start rolling right away, but I'm going to give you the proportions later on. And there's several, well, there are 2 ways actually of doing this recipe. You can roll out the dough and put your mushroom stuffing over the beef and just wrap it up in raw dough and bake it. But I found in doing this quite a bit that you never can get your pastry cooked through, because tenderloin of beef only takes 45 minutes to cook. And 45 minutes is not enough time for the pastry to cook. So I think absolutely the best way to do it, because I hate soggy pastry, is to make a cooked pastry crust and set the beef in it and then have a raw dough for the top. And so we've done this before with our salmon dish. Here is an Angel Food cake pan, and this is just about the right size to hold our beef. So butter a pan of the right size. I've already buttered this one. And then we'll set the dough on it and bake it. And you want to roll out your dough about 1/8 of an inch thick. That's not quite long enough. And then place it on the tin. Notice, I think this is one more easy way to make pastry crusts. And set it on and then press it down. And then cut it off so it's about 1.5 inches deep. I'm using one of these dough wheels that I got at our supermarket for some very small price, but it's very convenient. And then save the scraps from this, because you're going to make some decorations out of it. And I'm going to cut that off the other end. Then press that down, and this is the dough was about 16 by 7 by 1/8 inch thick. Then you want to take a fork and prick all down on top of the dough at about 1/4 inch intervals. And this is very important because this is going to keep the dough from puffing up on the tin. And while I'm pricking this, I'll give you the proportions for this particular pastry dough. And that is 3 cups of all-purpose flour. And to measure the flour, scoop your dry measure 1 cup right into the bag and then level it off with a flat thing. So you have 3 cups of flour. And then you have 1 3/4 sticks of chilled butter, 4 tablespoons of chilled vegetable shortening, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 3/4 cup of ice water. And make the pastry in the usual way, form it into a ball, and then chill it for 2 hours so that it will have firmed up and relaxed. And then you have your pastry case made, and you then want to bake it. I don't know if I gave the butter proportions right. That was 1 3/4 sticks or 6 ounces. I just don't want to make any mistakes in case you are writing this down. And then when your case is all done, you can either refrigerate it or bake it immediately. And bake it in a 425-degree oven for 12 to 15 minutes until it is just colored very lightly like this. and then let it sit on its pan for 10 minutes to cool, and then unmold it. And there you have just a very, very lightly browned pastry crust, and you're not going to have a soggy bottom. And now you have this bit of leftover dough here, which you're going to roll out and make a top with. Because the pastry crust, the beef is going to set in this pastry crust, and then the raw dough is going to go on top, because the top dough will cook quicker than the bottom. And this we're going to roll out and make into a flaky pastry, or a mock puff paste, or demi-feuilleté. And so roll it out into a rectangle, and then take a tablespoon and a half of butter and spread it over the bottom half, and then fold the top half down over it. So for those proportions, I used about 1/3 of the pastry that I cut off to save for the top, and then roll it out again into a rectangle. And then again, spread some butter on. We've done this one before too, but it really makes it, then you're going to end up with layers of dough and layers of butter, and then it's going to puff up a little bit. And then turn the top over, and then roll it out once more. You see, that's a nice little rectangle now. And then roll it again into a rectangle about 16 inches long, and fold it into thirds. And then chill it. I really should have had, my butter shouldn't have been quite so soft, because it's breaking through, but that's not going to make any difference, really. Wrap it up and chill it for 2 hours. And this chilling is very important, because now that you've rolled your dough quite a bit, you're going to find that it's going to be rubbery and hard to roll, and this chilling and relaxing will make it so that it's much easier to roll. And there it's wrapped in a little package, and then it goes into the refrigerator. And then after it's sat for 2 hours, roll it into a rectangle about 16 by 7, and all of this you can do ahead. See, I've done this ahead, and I've covered it with a damp towel, and then with some wax paper. And so we'll take this off. And so this is all ready to go for our pastry top. Now I want to see if this is long enough here. I've got this top, which is about 13 inches, but I want to have an overlap of about 1/2 inch, so I'm just going to make it a little bit longer. Because we're really ready to assemble now. And then with the scraps that you had, roll them out. Oh, I've got many pieces of dough here. Now there with your scraps, you can use them for decorations. Take a little ravioli wheel and make some long strips. I'm just going to do some very simple decorations. You can be very fancy if you want to be. And then, for some other decorations, take a round cookie cutter and cut some other little decorations out. That's going to be just about enough, 6 of those. And then all of this you can do ahead and keep in your refrigerator in the covered, on a covered tray. Be sure that you don't fold your top cover, because it might break. And now you see you're really all ready to go. You have a baking platter, You can use either a cookie sheet or a fireproof baking platter and just butter it just long enough to put your pastry shell on. And there's your pastry shell on. And you have your mushroom mixture all ready. If you refrigerate this, beat it up so it's soft enough for spreading, and put half of your Duxelles mixture in the bottom of your shell. You may want to make more mushroom mixture than this. I'm just using it mainly just as a flavoring. And you don't want to assemble this until the last minute because you don't want to get your pastry crust soggy. And here is your piece of beef, which should just fit in, luckily. And if you haven't marinated it, put some salt on top. This has been marinated, so it doesn't need any salt. And then spread the rest of your mushroom mixture on top. This is a delicious mixture with that Madeira and the foie gras in it. And now you want to paint the outside of your case with an egg glaze. This is just one whole egg beaten with a half teaspoon of water. And you want to put the glaze on all along the sides of the shell so that that's going to seal the cover on. Now, put your cover on. If it's a little too long, take some scissors and cut it off. You want it just to cover over fall down about an inch or so, because that will protect the case, and press it in closely so that it adheres. And then you put your egg glaze on top. And this isn't always an important part of the recipe because the egg glaze gives a nice brown glitter. And you can't get the professional looking glitter unless you use egg. Some people use evaporated milk or something like that. But even if you don't use all of the egg in your glaze, you can use the rest of it for scrambled eggs, but don't be chintzy on the glaze. And then your decorations go on top of that. So here's our long strip. And there's another long strip. You can be very fancy indeed with the decorations. I'm just giving you a bare idea of what you can do. And put some of these little circles on. I got some more of them. And then put some glaze on top of them. You don't have to put on decorations, but I think it's much more fun if you do. And then you take a sharp knife and draw it just very gently across the top, all over, making little crosshatch marks. And this gives the glaze more of a texture as it cooks. See, I'm just making little crosshatches. And all of this you do at the last minute. You have to glaze just at the very last minute because the egg should be wet. Then you have to make some air holes in, because if you don't make some air holes, the steam develops and the pastry doesn't cook properly. So take a little knife and make a hole about 1/8 of an inch thick, one in the middle and two on each end. And then make some funnels either out of paper or aluminum foil, because if you didn't put the funnels in, you'd find that the pastry holes would close up. And then to make sure how the beef is cooking, I always put a thermometer in. And I'll put that in the middle funnel. And the funnel just goes right down, just through the pastry dough is all. And you want to get the tip of the thermometer into the middle of the beef and just stick that right down into the funnel. I think I'll put the funnel down a little farther, and that goes right into the beef. And then it goes into the oven. And this is a preheated 425-degree oven. And a tenderloin of beef only takes about 45 minutes to cook. And you start out at 425 degrees, and as soon as the beef begins to brown, that'll be in about 15 or 20 minutes, turn the oven down to 375. And the beef is done at a thermometer reading of 137. So set your timer for about, say, 15 minutes so that you can look, and then turn it down. So remember, that's 45 minutes in all, 425 at first, and then 375. So there's our ready beef, our ready Wellington, and there are the funnels. You just take them out, and there's your thermometer. There. And now if you have some fat in the pan, just wipe it out with paper towels. In this case, there isn't any. And you notice we have our funnel holes. So with some of your pastry scraps, you can make some just little anythings that you can stick in to hide the funnel holes, and that's rather pretty too. And then some decoration around. We'll put in around a little parsley. I noticed the other day when I did one in this dish, I buttered the whole dish, and then it got awfully black when it was cooking. So that's why when you butter the dish and set your pastry crust on, just butter the part where the pastry crust is, and then you won't get your dish black. And so also when after you can do this, bake it a little bit ahead, but as soon as it's done, take it out of the oven and let it rest for a little while, because it should rest for 20 minutes before you carve it, because it allows the juices to go back into the meat. And if you want to do it ahead, then after it's rested a little bit, put it in a 120-degree oven. And it will keep for, oh heavens, a good half hour or so. So we're ready now to serve it. There we are. You know, with this, in carving, you just take a knife and cut it right straight down, and I always cut off the first slice, which is just crust, and set that aside, and then cut it right into pieces about an inch thick. There. You notice that the beef separates a little bit, but as you put it on its plate, you have to rearrange it a little bit. So actually, when everything is ready, this beef Wellington is not such a terribly difficult thing to cook. And, of course, it's obviously not a French recipe, because the French would never name anything after Wellington, after their Waterloo. But what's in the name? It's what's in the crust, this beautiful beef, that counts. So that's all for today on The French Chef. This is Julia Child. Bon appétit.
The French Chef has been made possible by a grant from the Polaroid Corporation and a grant from Hills Brothers Coffee Incorporated.
Julia Child is co-author of the book Mastering the Art of French Cooking.